Today, our guest is Chris McKenna from Protect Young Eyes. We'll be talking with Chris about the importance of parents having conversations with their children about technology, social media, and the digital world, and tools available to help parents with those challenging conversations. We'll also be talking about federal legislation, specifically KOSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, and the Earn It Act. We'll also be asking Chris what key actions parents can take to protect their children from online sexual predators. Join us today with Chris McKenna.
In March 2019, CNN reported that Instagram was the leading social media platform for child grooming by sexual predators. Our own test accounts quickly discovered that young people, particularly young girls, can be hunted like prey. We started an Instagram account with 2 photos and tried to mimic the behavior of an average teen girl. We posted 2 selfies with 3 hashtags each, searched a few hashtags, and liked a few photos. Within a week, we had dozens of men sending us images of their genitals, telling us they were horny, and sending us hardcore pornography through direct messages. Even after we told all of them that we were only 12, they were relentless.
Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Chris McKenna. It is so wonderful to have you with us here today.
Hi, Penny. I am glad to be here from all the way across the way in Michigan, right?
2 M states today.
That's right.
So, Chris, let's just start off by going right into one of the areas that you really have command on, like no other I've heard. So we know that the digital world really has taken command of all of our communication throughout the world.
Yeah.
And I think that children today are experiencing something unlike any other childhood previously in history because of this digital world and technology.
Definitely.
So, Chris, share with our listeners the importance of parents having conversations with their children about technology, about social media and the digital world, and what tools are available to help parents have those challenging conversations.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. So, Penny, today it can be so overwhelming for parents and caregivers because it's not what we were used to growing up, right? It's something that we have come into and we're watching our kids, and it can be scary for us. One of the things that we try to do at Protect Young Eyes is help all parents and grandparents uncover their digital superpowers, because it often takes untechnical things that become the most helpful for our children. Now, we do need to know some technical things, right? But it's a balance between relational solutions and technical solutions. Most of what is needed falls into one of those 2 categories. And we can put those big categories then into layers. We talk about 5 different layers of protection at Protect Young Eyes. If you can imagine those listening to this, a pyramid, right? The bottom of the pyramid is the widest. That's the base, the foundation that everything else is built on. And on that foundation, if you think of 5 layers in this pyramid going all the way up to the point at the top, the very bottom layer, the widest, and in this case, the most important when it comes to helping our children navigate digital spaces, is the relationship. And so we talk about modeling the right behaviors, parents showing our children how to use technology well, little simple micro moves like narrating how we use technology when I'm on a call where I'm doing something with my own devices, saying out loud the things that I'm doing, inviting my children into that when possible and when appropriate, so that we're doing technology together. Or asking my children permission to post photos of them online, letting my children know from a very young age that every digital photo has significant value, and their photos have value, and photos they might see of their friends that are shared in digital spaces have value, right? Little micro things I think we can do relationally to have conversations and just create this technology as a we activity when it's best and not just a me activity. Because one-on-one technology is hard, whether you're a teen or an adult, right? And so I want us to do that together. So those are things in that relational foundation. Other things involve being a parent that is constantly reminding our children that no matter what happens to them online, they can land safely and softly with us. We say in our core values, not only modeling, but also pursuing authentic connection with our children is a core value of families, relationally that have children who learn how to use technology in good, positive ways. And I want our children to know these things so well that when we say them, they're rolling their eyes and finishing our sentences because they've heard it so often. Our own personal algorithm when it comes to parenting. Algorithms don't care how frequently they show content or nudge our children. So we should be more persistent and more consistent than any algorithm with the good things that we want them to know, where they can come, that will never freak out, that they'll never be in trouble when they bring a troubling digital situation to us. We need to be a safe place for them. Those are just the relational things that sit at the very bottom of that pyramid before we've gotten to any controls, any toggles, or any switches. And if we get those things right, I think we're really well on our way to then doing the more technical things. But it really does demand that kind of intentionality. I'm sure we'll unpack some of the other technical areas, whether it's routers or software or things in just a minute. But those listening right now might be going, wow, that sounds hard. And you're right, but we have no choice. And for as difficult as it sounds to do, as difficult as it sounds to parent and protect, or to be a grandparent or even a teacher right now, when it comes to our young people, trust me when I tell you that it is even more difficult being a child today than it is raising that child today. We have put amazing young brains inside of, dare I say, lowercase g, God-like technology. And we've demanded that they never make a mistake, that they never stumble. And when children with children's brains behave like children inside of adult devices, why is that their fault? These are things we remind parents all the time, because the 14-year-old version of a condemning parent would have done the exact same thing. 14-year-old brains, Penny, are no different in 2024 than they were in 1984 or 1974 or whenever. It's just that what we've put in front of them is, and yet we demand them to behave differently. It really is our problem as parents to accept some of these realities. And if you accept the reality that every child that has a digital device will eventually make a mistake, I think it creates the right mindset. And that is a mindset of understanding and empathy, that when you put something that intelligent, that ridiculously smart, that you're putting them up against the most brilliant software engineers on earth, when they make a mistake, you're bound to respond with more calm and understanding. One thing I want to challenge every parent or caregiver with is this. What if when that horrible thing happens online to your child, that at the end of the conversation, there was more trust between you than when you started? That you responded with such calm and understanding that they were drawn to you, so that when the second time it happens, they'll run to you instead of run away from you. That should be our goal with how we respond. Maybe that means you go in the bedroom and practice every horrible thing that you hope never happens to your child in the mirror, and you practice responding with calm and empathy long before it ever happens, right? So most of what I've said so far is on us to change the way we think, to change the way we respond, to change the way we behave online. And I believe by doing those things, we invite our children into healthier, just better ways of being online.
So true, Chris. And there was so much going through my mind. And a couple of things that I want to touch on is I want to let everyone know, and we'll say this repeatedly, is that we do have your website up on our website, and also with this podcast information, protectyoungeyes.com. Go to that website to learn more about what Chris just talked about, because there was so much information in there. A couple of the things that I do want to talk about on your website, that your website brings information unlike any I've ever seen. And you talked about it. It is the actual equipment that comes with your computer when you want to get online, the difference between a modem and a router, and what the importance is of understanding what that equipment does. And if you can give us a real short answer there, and we can direct people to your website, because it really is outstanding information.
Thank you, Penny. Yeah, and moving up the pyramid, that's after the foundation is built with relationship, then we get to the Wi-Fi layer. And that's layer 2. Layer 3 is the device layer, where we put software on devices who move from network to network, or move from Wi-Fi at one home to Wi-Fi at grandma's house, say, for example. The 4th layer then is location. We only use digital devices in certain physical places, because bedrooms and bathrooms and other places where there's darkness and boredom often invite bad digital behavior. So these are the more technical layers. And so that 2nd one is second for a reason. And that is because in most homes, our router is the most important digital device in our house, and yet nobody ever pays attention to it. It can prevent early accidental exposures, which, as you know, the earlier a young brain is exposed to egregious, shocking, traumatizing content of all kinds, not just pornographic, but violent, explicit, just extreme content. Much like the early use of drugs often predicts the level of addiction that is felt in adulthood. The earlier you create certain dopamine loops in that very impressionable limbic part of the brain, the more difficult it is to let go of some of those compulsive behaviors later on in life, and to forget some of those shadows that those experiences create. I use that illustration with young people all of the time. I'll get to that in just a minute, but that's why the router is so important, because I want to prevent those early accidental exposures when you're doing presentation image research as a young child for some PowerPoint you need to do for class, and you stumble upon something. But not only for those children, but it also can control online use at night. Now, some are saying right now, well, Chris, there are data plans on cell phones. I get that. But for most young children, most of the devices that they use don't have data plans. It's Chromebooks, it's Kindles, it's tablets, it's MacBooks, it's smart TVs, right? It's PlayStations and Xboxes. These are all Wi-Fi dependent devices that depend on your router in order to get to the internet. But let's not forget about older children too. Not only does it create a culture of control, and I'll come back to what I mean by that in a minute, but it also can prevent temptation at night. Because let's say you punish a child, or you say that you can't use their device at night in their bedroom. We have a bit of a sickness in America in that we never throw away any of our old Apple devices, Penny. And we always keep all the boxes they came in too. Now, that old iPhone 6 from 4 years ago that's sitting in your drawer, I know it doesn't have a SIM card, but do you know where it still works? It still works on your router. They all do. They're just like an iPod. They all still work, and kids know this. And so I've had many parents come to me and say, well, I took their device away, but I forgot they had this, or I forgot this one was in the house. Or my friend, my son's friend gave him one of their iPhones from their house. That's a burner phone, if you've heard that terminology. Those are passed around like candy by kids, because there are Apple and Android old devices sitting around everywhere, and they all have browsers, so you can prevent that activity too. Now, when I said that routers can help with culture, not just the control, but the culture. This is what I mean by that. So I have 4 children. I have a daughter in college, and then I have 3 middle school boys right now. So pray for me. I have a 6th, a 7th, and an 8th grade boy, and then I have a freshman in college, my daughter. My 14-year-old son, my 8th grader, 2 weeks ago, he had 2 buddies over to spend the night. One of them brought an Xbox. Now, Cole knows our Wi-Fi password, and so when his buddy connected his Xbox to our home network, he, of course, gave him the password for our router, which is no problem. But my router had never seen that Xbox before. That was a new device. So I got a notification on my phone through the Griffin app. We have a Griffin router, telling me that a new device was trying to use my home network. Okay, I saw it was an Xbox. I knew whose it was, no problem. So I let it in, and I assigned a child's profile to it with filtering, because there are browsers on an Xbox. That's the control part. Then I had the opportunity to walk downstairs and say, hey guys, to Cole and his 2 buddies, just wanted to let you know, I just accepted the Xbox. It's now on our network. I can control it. I can see what's going on. I hope you guys have a good time. If anything happens on this Xbox that kind of freaks you out, you're not sure about, just come to me. No big deal. Have fun. And I walked away. That's the culture part. That for my son and his friends to understand, 1, that I'm involved, and 2, whatever happens, I'm cool. That's family culture when it comes to technology. And that may be more important than any filter that I could have put on that thing, right? Because they can come to me. Yeah. And it allowed me a chance to later on ask them, hey, how you having fun in the Xbox, right? Then I can be another C word. I can be curious because I knew it was connected and we'd already had a conversation. Everything starts with C here, right? That's a way just to create more of that trust, all because of a router. Who knew that a router could have such a profound impact on the digital culture and safety of your children? So I don't want people to underestimate it. So if they were to come to our website, which I'm gracious that you mentioned, if you go to our search, there's a really powerful search on our site. Just type in router or ultimate guide to router, and there's a guide in there that will walk you through different scenarios. If you don't know what a router or a modem or any of that is, fear not. You are not the only one. Many people are confused and intimidated by a router because it's so technical, and we really go out of our way to try to explain technical things in a very approachable, easy to understand way. I don't come from a tech background. My degree is in finance and business, and I've just learned as much as I can over the past, 8 or so years, and I try to explain things in a way that any parent can understand as a result. So there's a little bit of technical guidance there.
Well, that's brilliant technical guidance. And I know it's so appreciated by so many of the parents that are my friends and in my circle, because these are things that we talk about. And one of the things that you brought up again, which I was going to touch on, are grandparents.
Amen.
When I went to your website and I was looking through all of the brilliant blog posts that are filled with information on your website, one of the articles that really caught my eye was the 5 most dangerous places for kids to be online.
Yeah.
So you think by that title that I'm going to go in and learn about different apps. Well, it was surprising when I opened up the blog and I saw grandparents as number 1. And then I realized where you were going with that, which was so outstanding and really good information. But if we think parents today are having challenges, with technology and understanding this digital world, the other conversation is for those parents, which are now the kids, talking to their parents about the importance of digital online safety when the children are with grandpa and grandma.
Absolutely.
What are those conversations like? And can you just share with parents just a little bit about how important it is to really have those conversations, and also why it's important for grandpa and grandma when they are posting pictures of their grandchildren online, that it's important for them to do so in a safe manner also?
Yeah, no, I love when grandmas and grandpas come to our presentations. We do hundreds of those, and such a powerful influence grandmas and grandpas can have. Just some general things. You referred to that post, the 5 most dangerous places, which are buses, like school buses, bedrooms, bathrooms, grandma and grandpa's house, and sleepovers. Those are the 5 places. And it's not because grandma and grandpa are unsafe people.
Right.
It's that your Wi-Fi isn't always the best controlled. And so we just want to make sure that in digital spaces like grandma and grandpa's house, that you also have a Griffin router, when kids come over, because you have different rules and different routines. Kids are up later and they're hopped up on sugar. We want to make sure they're safe when they're with you too. And here's the thing about grandmas and grandpas. If the technical isn't your area of expertise, then I want you to focus on the relational. I'll sometimes joke with the grandparents in my presentations. I'll say, here's what you need to do. Bake a plate of cookies, set them on the table there at your home, walk over to your grandson or granddaughter and invite them over to the table. Have them sit down and look at them and say, you know what, amazing grandson or granddaughter, I do not understand all this snappy, chatty, ticky-tock stuff. But you know what? I don't have to. Because if you do anything on your phone or tablet while you're at grandma and grandpa's house and you can't show me, I will make your life miserable. Here, have a cookie, and just get up and walk away. And I'm joking, but you know what I mean by that. You can kind of say it with a smile and be like, just listen, because I'm a fan of saying the things that could happen out loud, putting all of that out in the light, because the things that you put out in the light automatically have less control over our behavior. It's just a funny thing.
True.
And so just by calling out the things to say, hey, I know that even with this Griffin router and even with the controls that are out there, there's things that you can always find. Here's what I want you to know. Number 1, that's not how we behaved here. And number 2, if something happened that you didn't even go after and it bothers you, or you see something that was accidental, I'll never freak out. Bring it to me because I love you so much. And these are the relational things that I want grandparents to really leverage, because at the end of the day, most grandkids don't like making their grandparents upset, even more so than their parents. And so use that to your advantage to connect with them and let them know that it's okay, that when those things happen, it's sometimes not our fault because the internet shows us a lot of stuff, and just bring it to me. And get that Griffin router while you're at it. Those are really powerful and important things. I want grandparents to engage, and those are a couple of simple ways that they can do that.
Yeah, outstanding. The things that you've just been describing, it's modeling good behavior. It's modeling to children that are learning how to move through life in difficult situations, how to handle those difficult situations when they get into them. I always say when I'm training on human trafficking and I hold up my smartphone when I do it, if you wouldn't send your minor child on a bus, a subway, an airplane off to anywhere in the world without adult supervision and just say goodbye, if you wouldn't do that as a parent, don't do that on the internet. Be that parent over the digital world as well, and make sure that your children know how to move through the digital technology and through the digital world in a safe manner. And they're going to learn that by parents modeling that behavior.
Absolutely.
Chris, we're both involved in policy making and with a national group that we meet with on Fridays to talk about federal legislation to protect children online. You are a champion in this area, and I applaud your dedication and leadership. There's two federal bills specifically that I'd like for us to talk about. And if you can talk about Earn It Act and KOSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, share with our listeners the importance of both of these bills and the distinction between the two.
Yeah, I would love to. So if we start with the Earn It Act, which is actually quite narrow in scope, we can then talk about KOSA. So Earn It, like all federal bills, stands for a longer set of words. And essentially, it came out of a 2019 hearing that I was a part of that really is just reminding all of us, including Congress, of the original intent of something that was called, or that is called, CDA 230, which creates blanket of immunity for online service providers so that people like you and I who submit content to sites, right? That's our content. You can't then just go and sue digital spaces because of things we did, right? So the spirit of CDA 230 back in 1996 was to allow technology to grow and not let people just sue these places for content we created. But what has happened over the past 8 years is that this blanket immunity has been inappropriately extended to cover organizations that knowingly facilitate the dissemination of illegal content, formerly referred to as child pornography. Now, you and I and others are trying to change that to be called child sexual abuse material. And so that was a long-winded intro of basically saying what Earn It is trying to say is that content which is illegal is still illegal, and Section 230 immunity does not apply to organizations that knowingly facilitate the hosting and distribution of child sexual abuse material. And it wants to also change that terminology that I just stated, that it actually wants to change the term child pornography, which is what it is in federal statute right now, to child sexual abuse material, to ensure that it's treated as evidence of a crime. When you think about it, child pornography describes what it is, and instead we should be describing the harm. Child sexual abuse. So we could get really graphic. I don't think this would ever make it. It's child rape, but instead, child pornography doesn't do it justice. So that's another aspect of this. The third aspect, which I think is really important here, is it creates a new child online prevention committee with oversight from Congress that can create suggestions. It's not rulemaking, but it can create suggestions for what best business practices businesses could use in order to comply or be better stewards of their digital spaces. So these are really important items for us to get right. Again, at the 50,000 foot level, through all the noise and distortion that the opposition has put out there. Number one, this is not an encryption bill. This doesn't stop an organization from encrypting. Now, Should organizations steward end-to-end encryption better than they are currently by just rolling it out without any other protections in place? Yeah, but the Internet Act doesn't speak to any of that. It doesn't penalize an organization for using end-to-end encryption, and anybody who says this is an encryption bill is just throwing red herrings all around. So that's one thing. And the second thing is it's just reminding us of what the original intent of Congress was, and that was to still prosecute child sexual abuse material and not shield those who don't do anything about it, like Pornhub and Twitter and others. So,
Right. Chris, were you involved with SESTA and FOSTA?
no, that was just before my time in advocacy. It was, yep.
That's when we really started to get involved with federal legislation. It was shocking to me to learn that at this point it would have been 2016, because SESTA FOSTA was passed in 2018. So when we started really getting involved at the federal level to lobby for those bills, it was shocking for me to learn that in 2016, it was legal for websites like Backpage.com and Craigslist and other websites to not only be hosting child sexual abuse material and ads, but making money off those ads. That was shocking to me. And I think that was the eye-opener to many of us in the anti-trafficking world, the fight that was ahead of us when it came to big tech. I think those bills were the big eye-opener. But they did get passed. For those that may be listening that may not know what SESTA and FOSTA stands for, on the Senate level, it was the Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act of 2018. And on the House side, it was Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act of 2018. And again, those two bills dealt with Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which were again working to address, that small section. Thank you for that. And thank you for that explanation of Earn It. Now, when we move into KOSA, do you want to speak a little bit about KOSA and why this particular bill is so important and why we are, those of us in the anti-trafficking world, those of us in the online child protection world, why we are really bringing a megaphone up to our mouths to talk about KOSA right now, because it is close to being able to come to a vote.
It is, and it's the Kids Online Safety Act. That one's a little easier to remember than all the words behind Earn It Act. And that's what KOSA stands for. And it could go to a Senate vote, which would be the first time any child safety legislation has gone to a vote in 25 years, which really speaks to the problem. We live in the wake of COPPA, which was passed in 1998, which made it so that online platforms could not collect personal identifiable information from anybody under age 13. And what has happened since then, Penny, is that law has been misinterpreted, not only in courts, but also by parents, to assign age 13 as this digital age of adulthood that every human who's 13, think about it, seventh graders, is ready for every digital space. It just makes no sense. 5 years before MySpace was even released, right? And so what KOSA is trying to do is to change that so that we provide minors with options to protect their information more up to age 16, to disable addictive product features, opt out of personalized algorithmic recommendations, right? Defaults toward the strongest privacy settings for children by default. You shouldn't have to hunt for protection. As we say at Protect Young Eyes, you should have to hunt for exploitation. Protection should be defaulted, especially when the device or the app in this case knows it's being used by a child. KOSA is going to give parents new controls to help their children spot harmful behaviors, right? With the advent of AI, so much could be detected earlier. It creates a duty for online platforms to prevent and mitigate specific dangers, things that we would all agree young people shouldn't be exposed to, like substance abuse, eating disorders, suicide, sexual exploitation, right? All these issues that we care deeply about. And it is also going to require that transparency goes way up so that parents and policymakers know whether online platforms are actually taking steps to address these risks with independent audits and things that will bring to light deficiencies so that they can remedy those things. So what Earn It is doing is really trying to remind us of something that has always been true, What KOSA is doing is trying to update old laws to 2024 for the intensity and intelligence that platforms have today that didn't exist when we set age 13 back in 1998. When you think about the types of digital risks, I mean, no social media even existed at that point in time. We had, Netscape and chat rooms and things like that, and that was about it. So that's why they're both so important. And, I know people will be listening to this even after this week and when we're having this conversation, Penny, but, I think this week even Senator Graham is going to be having a specific press conference to really press his colleagues and peers there in the Senate to bring these things to a vote. It's just time. So
Yeah, beyond time. And the unprecedented nature of this particular bill, currently there's 63 senators that have signed on as co-sponsors for this bill. This is truly a bipartisan bill.
Right.
I don't even know the last time I saw a bill, and I work in policy all the time. I don't even know the last time I saw a bill that had that many senators signed on as a co-sponsor in this type of legislation, and that it has so much support from the Democratic side, from the Republican side. The language has really been worked through. I'm being very optimistic and have my positive voice on. Off camera, I get a bit frustrated. This bill has been in the making for over 10 years. Over 10 years. It frustrates me at times when children are at stake that it takes us so long to even what it feels like move an inch to protect them. And that can be really frustrating. It can be frustrating for just the regular average citizen that doesn't understand how policymaking happens and how legislation happens. But at the same time, we are a government that is of the people. And it is we, the people, that need to be making our voices heard on the need to protect children online and in our communities. Chris, I've said this a million times to many people, and I say it to you. From my perspective, no one is more eloquent, informed, and direct when speaking to policymakers on the imperative need for laws protecting children online than you. In your opinion, why do you think it is taking 535 elected adults so long to pass meaningful federal protections for children online?
Yeah, that's a good one. So this was the same question that was asked of me last month. I had the opportunity to visit and go to the World Economic Forum in complete opposition to most of what was happening there, which was all about technology and AI and the dehumanization of this planet. I went there with a coalition to have the exact opposite conversation. That was to remind everybody what we're up against and specifically what our children are up against. And so this was actually a topic that I did a little bit of research on. I think what's really important for us to understand, Penny, is that there have never been companies ever as large as the organizations that we are fighting against right now. The size of these organizations is like nothing that we have ever seen. And so we follow a very predictable pattern in that we always allow industry to innovate, especially here in the United States, which is good, and we want that. And then once we discover that it's doing harm to people, we try to regulate it. Now what we have is a situation where the organizations that we're trying to regulate are so massive that we are struggling to rein them in. Other things that complicate this situation is that so many of the legislators that are in charge of creating these policies, unlike other industries that maybe they were a part of, generationally simply do not understand the level of harm that we're talking about. It's so complex what we're trying to do. And many of them, I know that many of them have younger individuals and staff in their office, but in terms of those individuals in the seats casting votes, they simply don't understand this extent and intensity of the harms that are out there because they just never really experience it themselves. And so I think these are some of the factors. The other thing that I think is really important to understand is that these same organizations control the narrative I mean, if I put a little bit of my hat on for just a minute, just to say, hey, what's going on here behind the scene? When it comes to search engine optimization and what is elevated in algorithms and who controls the algorithms and the narrative, the very organizations that we are trying to regulate control the narrative. They control the digital spaces where the conversation is going on. And so I don't want to discount that.
So important.
I'm not going to sit here and spin a bunch of conspiracy theories, but make no mistake, they own these spaces. They control the narrative, and they have, because of their resources, access to lobbying. It's different than anything else that we have ever encountered when it comes to regulation. And I think that this is what is going on. They are massive contributors. They lobby like no other. They're the biggest companies out there, and they control where the conversations are going on. And that is contributing to 530 some individuals not being able to do common sense things.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I think also one of the things too, having served at the local level and municipal government, one of the things that I see within our country as well is that we build communities for mobile adults, for healthy, younger mobile adults. And in those spaces, children and the elderly and those that have different mobility issues, those spaces are more challenging to maneuver around. And so our priorities tend to be, and the conversation tends to be on what affects and impacts those young, mobile, healthy adults who are out there in the workforce. We tend to make them the focus of more conversations because, and oftentimes, they're the ones spending money and they're the money makers and things like that. And it does come down to so much of what you just said. And I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things I did want to share, you use the term child pornography, which is still the legal language, which we definitely want to get changed. One of the things that I talk about when I train is whether we're Republicans or Democrats in the same space, can we all agree that when the United States Supreme Court declared pornography to be freedom of speech, can we all agree that child sexual abuse and child sexual torture is not and should never be considered freedom of speech? So to put the word pornography together with the word child, it just doesn't even make sense. And it should not be something that any of us agree should ever be together in the same sentence with the same thought.
Absolutely right.
Because they're two dramatically different issues and should be issues. And so thank you for really bringing that about. What we are working on at the federal level is to get that legal language changed. And that is so important. It's one of the simple steps that people can do to combat human trafficking is simply to help change their own language and help change that language when they're talking to policymakers. So this brings us to our last question to you. And one of the things that we do on this show, every single show, is we always tell our listeners ways that they can help to combat human trafficking in their communities. So Chris, what are 3 to 5 key actions parents can take right now to protect their children from online child predators? And you've mentioned a number of them already. And if you want to repeat those again, that's great. If you have new ones, boy, share with us today.
You bet. We've already covered a few in those layers. This is where, from a technical perspective, I don't think something I've mentioned yet is every single internet connected device in every single home belongs to parents. So we promote heavily this idea of parent-led ownership. And I think that's a really important idea here because whether you're preventing trafficking or preventing contact with predators or any other online behavior, I think there's a different mindset when you know that it doesn't belong to you, that this is mom or dad's device. So everything in every home that's connected to the internet that is touched by a minor is actually owned by parents, and kids are stewards of that under mom and dad's ownership. And these are things that you say out loud to kids. This even goes to grandparents. Grandparents never buy a digital device as a gift for your grandchildren. It's given to the family so that then it is used as a family. Again, that technology is better when it's a we activity and not a me activity. I think that's a brilliant way to help kids stay out of those digital spaces. I think it's helpful for every adult to understand that wherever children are online is also where adults are. It's always been that way. They're going to have contact with adults. Do they know what to do if you're going to let your child play Roblox or play Fortnite? Whatever it is, children are always going to have adults who reach out to them in some way. Do they know exactly what to do? A third thing I would say is everything connected to the internet must always be monitored. You must be involved. If it can't be monitored, it can't be used. And this isn't because you don't trust your children. It's because you don't trust 100 million people that you just invited into the life of your child. Like you wouldn't drop them off at the playground in a space where 100 million people are standing there saying, want to play, want to play, want to play, without you knowing who they are. So overall, I think all of that just could be summarized in, if it doesn't make sense in the analog world, then why would you do it in the digital world? And if we have that mindset in the digital decisions that we make, I think that'll go a long way into preventing our children from being in spaces where the risk of some of these harmful, encounters goes up. Because to me, most things, Penny, are a risk balance. We can't eliminate all risk in all parts of life, nor would we want to. I don't want my children living a problem-free childhood, because it actually turns them into an adult who doesn't know how to deal with any problems or any adversity. And we all know in this world there will be problems. But at the same time, I want to prevent egregious harm. And so I'm always in my brain, and it comes from this, Ernst & Young CPA background that I have, I'm always sort of weighing those risks. And I have just decided that when it comes to social media, when it comes to childhood, when it comes to some of these digital spaces, the risk that something could happen to them that is irreversible is greater than any benefit that any science or any researcher has communicated to me so far. And until we have, and this is something I learned from John Haidt, an author that is about to come out with a book, I subscribe to the preponderance of the evidence sort of approach when it comes to social media. And we should be waiting for the criminal statute sort of the threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt. We should have research showing that it's beneficial beyond a reasonable doubt before we give it to kids. And instead, it's the other way around. We've just said, well, it seems okay. No. Prove to me it's okay. So I want to wait as long as possible, give them their one precious childhood. They get it once.
Yeah.
And these are just those are some of the technical things that I think can maybe augment some of the things that I've said already, just to prevent our children from being in places where the risk of harm can go up.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Such good information. And, sometimes parents just need to know that it's okay for them to be parents over their child's social media, over their child's online access and the time that that child spends online. Sometimes parents just need to know they're not alone in this type of a situation, and they just need someone to give them permission to be the parent over their child's social media. And you do such a brilliant job of that. It's important for parents to know, and for others out there, even non-parents, caregivers, KOSA advocates, kids that are in the foster care system that have guardians, things like that. It's important for all of us to know that any one of us are just 2 clicks away on the internet from having live child sexual torture show up on our screens. That's how prevalent, pervasive, and how egregious it can be online. And there is currently, one of the things that you touched on was AI, artificial intelligence. To the best of my knowledge, Chris, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think right now in the United States that we have any federal legislation right now overseeing artificial intelligence online and deep fakes. And I don't think we do. And so
That's correct.
So these things that we're talking about, as much as we've been talking about them for years, and for us, it's on our end, it's been about 10 plus years. And for you, I think it was, did you say 6 to 8 years, somewhere in there?
Correct.
We know that we're really just touching the beginning. And the wave of criminal activity within technology is coming at us. And we do need to get our handle on that legislatively with our laws and really educate folks that are out there. And I just think Protect Young Eyes, you, all of your team, you are among the best that there is out there. Thank you so much, Chris McKenna, for being with us today and Protect Young Eyes, for the important work you are doing to protect children and families. I want to make sure everyone knows that to learn more about Protect Young Eyes, please visit their website at protectyoungeyes.com. We will have links to the topics discussed today on our task force website, which is at yhttf.org. And Chris, again, just my heart is overwhelmed and overloaded with gratitude. And I'm in this world and I still sometimes feel like, oh, this is so much. So thank you for helping us break this down, making it understandable and easy for parents and non-parents alike to understand.
My pleasure, Penny. Happy to help. And that just warms my heart to hear those things. I'd be happy to help any of your followers or listeners with any question. There's no question that you can't feel comfortable bringing to us. We are happy to help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing this journey with us. Join us next week when our guest will be Louis Greek from Truckers Against Trafficking. If you suspect labor or sex trafficking in the state of Montana, please call 833-406-7867. If you are being trafficked and need help, please call 911. If you suspect labor or sex trafficking outside of the state of Montana, please call your regional FBI office. You may also call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888.